Well, having conquered the east lets us head north. We begin, as before, in sort of this desolate no man's land directly to the north. It's clearly been long enough for entire trees and foliage and stuff to grow back, but you can see war mechs. It's got to be what that thing was. It had guns on it. You can see the red cracked pits with bones in them. You can see ruined skyscrapers and buildings. This is where all of the nasty stuff went down. Additionally, we've got another gate, just like the one we saw to the east. And in fact, if we open up our map and look, we see a diamond-shaped gate surrounding the entire city. So clearly, where we are now was always the outskirts, always outside of the walled part as we stepped out here. This area is much more linear than the previous one was. Look at that derpy Titan up there. I actually missed him the first time I went around. And besides this library area off here, it really follows one massive push up the mountain. Now, whereas the eastern area, well, there's another one of those kneeling mechanical men, like we saw guarding the gateway to the east. So we've seen one of those associated with every gateway so far. Whereas the temple was very easily accessible. Check out those cool guardian statues there. The water temple, and we called it a temple, but it might as well have been an arboretum or just a nice place to reflect and relax, eventually, as we saw it turn into a munitions factory. Where we're going now looks like it was hard to get to if you didn't fly. You can see flags blowing. It's implied to be an arduous journey. Now, because of the mechanics, the only really difficult part is once you actually get up to the mountaintop, and start fighting everybody. But even though some of the stairways are overgrown and some of the pathways up there have been destroyed, it was never supposed to be an easy trek to get to the top of these mountains, to get to these cities. And once you get here, you find enough accommodations to hold a lot of people, whether they were monks or philosophers. I think we can debate as to the purpose of this place, but certainly it was meant to be quite a journey here, and it was supposed to be separated from regular life down in the city, which brings to mind some Tibetan monasteries. I think is a really clear image that we can get up here, or some of the Central and South American temple cities. It's interesting that I have no idea what these little plaques mean here, or if the glowing, I think that one glowing thing all the way to the right is just sort of hidden, but anyway. There's enough buildings and enough areas to accommodate quite a lot of people. The crows don't seem to use them at all. The goblins don't. Hidden off to the side down here, we've got what I believe to be a mausoleum of some kind. It's definitely in the dark, and there's traps to keep people out and stuff, which, again brings to mind ancient temples and the like. And I'm not actually going to go in there, but it is full of bones. There's just piles and piles of bones everywhere. So that seems to be at least what it was used to be used for. And whatever happened with the events that happened here, the crows don't take any interest in things. Look at that guy. I kind of like his little goofy snaggletooth grin climbing up that mountain. So you wonder if this area was also assaulted by, whatever the Titans were from, and whether that one just didn't make it up, or he was stopped by some other force. He doesn't appear to have fully climbed and reached his destination. The going gets tough up here, although again the fights are the real challenge, as everywhere, but you can definitely see that it used to be easier. Now up here, we get our first sort of peek at some of the old inhabitants. You see the more parrot-like birds. I guess I'm not sure if the big birds are supposed to be a different species, or if, as these crows develop and grow, that they would grow into something like that. But regardless, fittingly for being way up here, it is a bird-based cult, I guess we could say, a religion of some kind. Although again, I think there's maybe some debate about that possible. We'll get into that later. By the time of now, we're having these blood sacrifices on altars, which is very Aztec. But we can talk to sort of a recent refugee who recounts that, things went bad in a hurry, and there was apparently a schism. Now, whether this guy used to be a priest or whether he was just, more of a philosopher, writer, scientist is I'm not sure. But regardless, there is a lot of iconography around. There are these great glowing pillars, which glow pink, the color of the munitions plant, and things like that. I wonder if they're meant to be infused or something. There are these areas where clearly some fighting is going on. These are crystal dog bodies, which is interesting, along with what looks like the old priesthood, although that bottom one there looks like one of the new priests mad at you. So, there was clearly a fight of some kind down here. Also, all throughout here you find, scattered wreckages like what I showed there. And what else is interesting is you find these crystal dogs around in different places. We found their bodies down south, and you run into a couple encounters with them. Now look up here at these dead crow skeletons. That totem pole is riddled with bullets, which doesn't really match anybody that we've found so far. People either use energy-based weapons, kind of like ours, which haven't been shown to leave bullet holes, or just, claws and stuff like that. Your enemies here are still crows, of the kind that we saw in the flashback. So the original inhabitants of this place haven't quite been driven out. Instead, there was a religious difference, a religious schism that led them out. One thing that I think is interesting is, although this place now clearly serves a religious purpose, you don't really find much iconography in the form of what you might call an idol or something like that. You don't find images that look particularly bird-like, besides a few of the totems. You just find complicated patterns. There are two statues and all kinds of things like that. But most of what you find doesn't appear to be appealing to any particular kind of deity. You see those the images you find on the teleporters. That's more in line with what you see in other places. So here we are at the mountain top. You can see that doomed explorer. I wonder if he's supposed to be a reference to old mountain climbers, people who scaled Everest and the like. And again, this is this major giant module, whatever you want to call it, is clearly in a place of maximum significance. So this was more like an arena where people met, and it certainly got the most, overly religious kind of places. You see that book that was open there, which presumably the main guy read from. I liked his old-timey wig and the fact that he was a bird perched on a shadow man. That itself is interesting. It makes you wonder, in particular, what kind of a relationship they had, whether the shadow guy was in charge and he was only a magic puppet or something like that. That throne clearly wasn't made in a hurry, though, and that was a place of precedence. And so what's interesting to me is the center place, it comes after this giant library. And if you notice with the snow, with the general disrepair, the library is falling into disuse, and this makes me wonder if this place was originally meant to be a place of study, a place of philosophy, or whether these were all, they could well be all holy scriptures or something like that. It's hard to say what these are meant to be. There are little, I noticed that there were little in-code writings on the side of the library there. I have to look up and see what those are. So our enemies in this area, we have the little priest, we have those big crows, and we have those little green abominations. Now, all of the areas where there are blood sacrifices appear to be fairly recent. The blood is still, fresh on them and everything. So you do wonder if the schism, which was described and happened from sort of a hardline faction. If some warlike group drove out the rest. And that's sort of what we're seeing here. Clearly, the area was trapped a long time ago, and it was never, it's never super easy to navigate. There are all these little alcoves everywhere, and they've all got ornamentation in them. They've clearly been here for a long time. But the only things I really see in terms of definite practices that we might consider religious or something like that is a veneration of the dead, because a lot of this stuff is, catacombs and look at all these bones up here against the wall, and you can see sort of what looks like a mummified priest or something like that. And whatever those hanging things are, mummification chambers maybe or something, equally kind of creepy. There are those big horrible ant monsters or whatever those things are supposed to be. But you can see as we progress further in, they've got more of those sacrificial altars, although they appear to be, either they've been in use for long enough that the blood is dried and those bones are on them, or they were originally used for some other purpose. It's hard to say. Maybe this was always sort of a bloody religion. It's also worth noting in this, massive, library, whatever the subjects they were studying up here, there is a back path through the woods, which is now overgrown, but nevertheless was clearly intended to be used. I mean, they cut this, must have taken forever, this massive staircase down the mountains, although again, not quite easy to get up. You have to be a good drifter. There's crashed planes, there's more of the carvings into the stone that they're known for, along with those flags, which are maybe meant to mark trails up the harsh mountainside. I could see that. And that leads us down to where we started the game. So you wonder what we were doing, if we were looking for something. Originally planned to go up the mountain, but the way was closed to us. That giant totem almost looks like the ones that we saw over in the eastern section, in the water area there. And obviously this is another war-torn area. You see the remnants of road blockades. You see those big hands. Interestingly, the holes in those, for some reason, they make them look like machine gun weapons to me. I can imagine those making the holes that we saw in the invasion. And you've got these two-part things here. To me, it kind of looks like a bare-faced split in two, although it could be, they could be just two totems on either side. And it leads us down into the depths of the mountains. So now we have a much better sense of where we were when we started here, and we're in this just massive chamber. You wonder if these are all sort of like those big monuments that were raising up on the surface, or what the heck these things are supposed to be. They're glowing all over. There's robot pilots and stuff down here, and more hulks of invasions. So clearly this area was not unaffected by whatever catastrophe laid low the kingdom. And it's worth noting that down here, you've got these goblin enemies, and they're not really affiliated with the north or with the east. Check out that big hulk. Most areas have their own particular enemies, and you find those goblins in sort of these neutral zones. More overgrown bots. So again, whatever happened was a long time ago. We've seen fresh blood on the altars, and that can't have been from the same time as the overgrown rusted hulks. We do get that very nice view of the city from up here. You can't really make out its diagonal structure, but that's fine. You can even see the stream that we would have been next to when we were down there. It's really cool, just the amount of detail that was put into the settings. And as we progress up and along, we find ourselves in this other library. Now, whether this is also part of the Bird Kingdom, whatever it was, before or after the schism, whether it had some new kind of knowledge that was abandoned. You see those kneeling robots here. And we can translate, as I will now, the monoliths, the slabs, from this part of the level. It is transcendence, faith and mortality, rifts crafted, dangerous potential, a foundation for faith and violence, a loss of self, a narrow path traveled. So I thought I would show just a couple examples in the end here of what I think are pretty clearly some influences from that dictated this level. You've got both Tibetan mountain temples, Buddhist temples, and you've also got South American burial sites and carved iconography. So overall, the feeling that I'm getting from this area is of knowledge which was maybe kept secret, which was maybe kept high in sort of a race of people, obviously birds because they're living up in the air, who kept it, but there were ideological differences. And whether the invasion caused the schism, or whether the invaders were working with part of the people who were in the schism, or whatever happened, there was this bloody division between the two of them, and the people that you find guarding the area up top are this more violent sect. And when they talk about stuff like rifts crafted, dangerous potential, a foundation for faith and violence, that's pretty clear. Whoever took over this area doesn't care about the massive libraries. They had more or less discarded it. They maybe have some of the imagery of the previous study that had been done here, and it wasn't carried out much. A loss of self, a narrow path traveled. So they'd become extremists. Whether they were isolationist or whether they were planning to invade somebody else, that's not clear. The source of their powers is not clear, but that's what we found. That's what traveling into the mountains we came across. If anybody else has any further theories on what's going on or what we encountered, anything in particular to say about the North, I'd love to hear that. But otherwise, I I look forward to exploring the West with y'all. See you next time.